The air in the grand ballroom of the Blackwood estate was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, aged whiskey, and something far more primal. It was the night of the Winter Solstice Gala, the most important event of the year for the supernatural elite. Crystal chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceilings, casting a shimmering glow over the crowd of billionaire heirs and powerful pack leaders. But despite the music and the clinking of champagne flutes, a heavy tension settled over the room. Everyone was waiting for him. Alpha King Silas Vane was not just a leader, he was a legend. He was the wealthiest man in the Northern Hemisphere, owning half the skyline and ruling the most powerful pack in existence with an iron fist. He was known for his coldness, his ruthlessness, and his complete lack of interest in finding a mate. To Silas, a mate was a weakness, a distraction from the empire he had built. He stood on the balcony overlooking the ballroom, his dark suit tailored to perfection, his eyes scanning the crowd with a predatory indifference. Elena stood in the corner of the room, tucked away behind a large marble pillar. She wore a simple, midnight blue dress that she had found at a vintage shop, a far cry from the designer gowns worn by the other women. She shouldn't have been there. She was a low-ranking shifter from a broken pack, working 3 jobs just to keep her younger brother in school. She had only taken the catering gig tonight because the pay was triple what she usually made. She wasn't supposed to be seen. She was supposed to blend into the shadows, serve the drinks, and leave before the moon reached its peak. But the universe had other plans. As Elena moved through the crowd with a tray of crystal glasses, a sudden, electric jolt shot through her body. It started in the center of her chest and radiated outward, making her breath hitch in her throat. Her heart began to race, drumming a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She felt a magnetic pull so strong it nearly knocked her off her feet. It was a scent that shouldn't have been possible: sandalwood, rain-drenched earth, and something dangerously metallic. She looked up, her eyes searching the room frantically until they landed on the man on the balcony. At that exact moment, Silas Vane turned his head. His gaze, sharp as a blade, locked onto hers. The world around them seemed to dissolve. The music faded into a dull hum, and the voices of the hundreds of guests became nothing more than static. Elena felt the air leave her lungs. In the depths of Silas's dark eyes, she saw a flicker of gold, the mark of the wolf recognizing its other half. Elena's hand trembled, and the tray in her hand tilted dangerously. She forced herself to look away, her mind screaming in panic. This couldn't be happening. She was a nobody, a girl with nothing to her name, and he was the king. If the world found out she was his mate, she would be hunted, scrutinized, and eventually crushed by the weight of his world. She didn't want this. She didn't want the drama or the danger that came with a man like Silas Vane. Without thinking, she turned and began to weave through the crowd toward the service exit. She had to get out. She had to run before the bond took hold, before he could reach her. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. She pushed through the heavy oak doors and into the cold night air, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the sprawling estate, where the forest met the manicured lawns. She thought she was safe. She thought she had escaped the inevitable. Part 2. The cold air bit at Elena's skin, but she didn't care. She stumbled toward the old gravel road where her beat-up car was parked. She just needed to get home. If she could get home, she could pretend this never happened. She could go back to her quiet life and forget the way Silas Vane's eyes had burned into her soul. But the bond was a physical weight, a chain pulling her back toward the mansion. Every step away felt like her heart was being ripped from her chest. Suddenly, the air pressure behind her changed. A low, vibrating growl echoed through the trees, a sound so deep it made the very ground beneath her feet tremble. Elena froze. She didn't have to turn around to know who was standing there. The scent of sandalwood and rain was now overwhelming, wrapping around her like a heavy velvet cloak. Silas walked out of the shadows, his movements fluid and dangerous. He had discarded his suit jacket, and his white silk shirt was unbuttoned at the collar. He looked less like a billionaire and more like the apex predator he truly was. His eyes were no longer dark, they were glowing with a fierce, molten gold. He stopped just a few feet away from her, his chest heaving as if he had run miles to catch her. Elena took a step back, her heels sinking into the soft earth. She tried to find her voice, but it was stuck in her throat. Silas didn't speak at first. He just watched her, his gaze raking over her face as if he were memorizing every detail. The silence was deafening, filled only by the sound of their synchronized breathing. "Why are you running?" Silas finally spoke. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble that sent shivers down Elena's spine. It wasn't a question. It was a demand for an explanation. Elena shook her head, her eyes wide with fear. "You don't want this, Silas. Look at me. I'm nothing. I'm a waitress. I have no status, no power. You need a queen, someone who can stand beside you and lead. That isn't me." Silas took a step closer, closing the distance between them until he was towering over her. He reached out, his large hand cupping her jaw with a surprising gentleness. His skin was burning hot against her cold face. "You think I care about titles? You think I care about what the council or the other packs think?" He leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear. "I have waited 100 years for this feeling. I have searched every corner of this earth for the one soul that belongs to mine. And you think I'm going to let you walk away because of a blue dress and a job title?" Elena felt her resolve crumbling. The touch of his skin triggered a wave of pleasure and longing so intense it made her knees weak. She wanted to lean into him, to let him take care of everything. But the fear was still there, lurking in the back of her mind. "You don't understand," she whispered. "My life is complicated. I have responsibilities. My brother, my pack, they won't accept this." "Then let them try to stop me," Silas growled. His thumb traced the line of her lower lip, his eyes darkening with possessiveness. "You're mine, Elena. The moon has decided. There is no force in this world or the next that will keep you from me." He began to pull her back toward the mansion, his grip firm but not painful. He wasn't giving her a choice. He was claiming what was his, and for the first time in her life, Elena felt a flicker of hope buried beneath the terror. But as they approached the lights of the gala, she realized that the hardest part wasn't the king, it was the world that was waiting to tear them apart. Part 3. The return to the ballroom was not quiet. Silas didn't lead her through the back entrance. He walked her straight through the main doors, his hand gripped firmly around her waist, pulling her flush against his side. The music died instantly. The clinking of glasses stopped. Hundreds of pairs of eyes turned toward them, filled with shock, disbelief, and in many cases, pure envy. A tall, elegant woman in a shimmering gold gown stepped forward. It was Lady Camille, the daughter of a rival alpha who had been campaigning for years to be Silas's mate. Her face was a mask of calculated fury as she looked Elena up and down. "Silas, what is the meaning of this?" Camille asked, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "Who is this girl? Surely she's just a staff member who got lost." The room held its breath. Elena felt the heat of the stairs burning into her. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the floorboards. She looked up at Silas, expecting him to hesitate, to perhaps realize the mistake he was making in front of the most powerful people in their world. Instead, Silas tightened his grip on Elena. His wolf was near the surface now, his teeth elongated and his eyes burning with a terrifying light. He didn't look at Camille. He looked at the entire room, his voice booming with the authority of a king. "This woman is your Luna," Silas declared. His voice echoed off the marble walls, leaving no room for argument. "She is my mate. She is the queen of the Blackwood pack, and she will be treated with the respect her title demands." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Camille's face turned a sickly shade of white. "But you can't be serious," she hissed, her voice low enough for only those nearby to hear. "She's a commoner. She's a shifter with no lineage. You would insult the traditions of our kind for a stray?" Silas moved so fast it was a blur. One moment he was standing by Elena's side, and the next, he was inches from Camille's face. The air in the room grew heavy with his dominant aura, making several people in the front row drop to their knees. "Choose your next words carefully, Camille," Silas whispered, and the sound was more frightening than a roar. "My mate is not a stray. She is the other half of my soul." If any of you, anyone at all, thinks they can judge her or treat her as anything less than royalty, you will answer to me. And you know how I deal with my enemies." He turned back to Elena, his expression softening instantly. It was a transformation that stunned the onlookers. The ruthless Alpha King, a man known for his cold indifference, was looking at a nameless girl with a devotion that was almost holy. Elena felt a surge of pride she hadn't known she possessed. She squared her shoulders and looked Camille in the eye. She wasn't going to let Silas fight this battle alone. If she was his mate, then she had to be worthy of him. She had to find the strength that had been buried under years of struggle and survival. "I am not leaving," Elena said, her voice clear and steady. The words were for Camille, but they were also for Silas. And for herself. The tension in the room reached a breaking point. Camille turned on her heel and stormed away, followed by her entourage. But the silent judgment of the room remained. This was only the beginning. The billionaire world was a shark tank, and Elena had just been thrown into the deep end. But as Silas tucked a lock of hair behind her ear, she realized she wasn't alone. She had the king, and he was ready to burn the world down to keep her safe. Part 4. The days that followed were a whirlwind of luxury and chaos. Silas moved Elena into the penthouse of his headquarters, a glass fortress that overlooked the entire city. He showered her with everything she could ever want: designer clothes, rare jewels, and the best security money could buy. But more than the material things, he gave her his time. He spent every evening with her, listening to her stories about her brother, her dreams of opening her own bakery, and the hardships she had faced. For Silas, Elena was the missing piece he hadn't known he was looking for. She grounded him. She challenged him. She wasn't afraid to tell him when he was being too arrogant or too harsh. She brought a light into his dark, corporate world that he had never experienced before. However, the Council of Alphas was not pleased. They viewed Silas's choice as a threat to their purity and their power. They called for an emergency meeting, demanding that Silas reject the bond for the sake of the supernatural community. They claimed a low-ranking mate would weaken the pack and make them vulnerable to their enemies. Silas laughed at their demands. He walked into the council chambers with Elena by his side, both of them dressed in matching black, looking every bit the power couple they were becoming. He didn't wait for them to speak. He stood at the head of the long obsidian table and looked at the men who thought they could control his heart. "You speak of weakness?" Silas asked, his voice calm but lethal. "You think my mate makes me weak? Look at her. She has survived more in her short life than any of you have in a century. She has strength you can't even imagine. And as for my pack, they have never been more unified. They see a Luna who understands them, who has lived among them, not someone who looks down on them from a golden throne." The oldest council member, a man with graying hair and a permanent scowl, stood up. "Tradition dictates." "Tradition is dead," Silas interrupted, his voice echoing. "I am the king. I make the laws. And my law is simple. Elena is your Luna. If you cannot accept that, then you are free to leave this alliance. But know this, if you leave as my enemies. And I have never lost a war." The council fell silent. They knew Silas wasn't bluffing. They knew his power, both in the boardroom and on the battlefield. One by one, they lowered their heads in a gesture of submission. Elena felt a wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't just about the titles or the money. It was about acceptance. It was about knowing that she belonged. That night, back at the penthouse, Silas and Elena stood on the balcony, watching the moon rise over the city. The city lights twinkled like fallen stars, and the air was cool and crisp. Silas wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. "I told you I wouldn't let you leave," he whispered into her hair. Elena smiled, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "I'm glad you didn't. I didn't think I could ever have a life like this. I didn't think I deserved it." Silas turned her around in his arms, his eyes filled with a warmth that was reserved only for her. "You deserve the world, Elena. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." He leaned down and kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss that sealed their bond forever. In that moment, The waitress from the Broken Pack and the Billionaire Alpha King were simply two souls who had finally found their home. The world would always have its challenges, and there would always be people who tried to pull them apart, but they didn't care. They had each other, and they had a love that was written in the stars. As the moon reached its peak, casting a silver glow over the city, the Alpha King held his Luna tight. He had built an empire, but he had finally found something worth protecting. He had found his heart, and he was never letting go.